Commander Zektar had conquered 17 star systems. His fleet had reduced civilizations to ash. His warriors had broken the will of a dozen species, and his name was whispered in terror across 3 galactic arms. He had seen every form of warfare the galaxy could offer, from the crystalline hive minds of Kepler 442b, who fought with mathematical precision, to the plasma-wielding berserkers of the Outer Rim who knew no fear. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what he witnessed when humanity entered the war. What he saw that day would haunt him for the rest of his existence. It would make him question everything he thought he knew about warfare, about courage, and about what it truly meant to fight for survival. The humans didn't just battle. They did something far more terrifying. They turned war itself into an art form. This is his account of the day the galaxy learned why you never corner a human. This is the story of why, after millennia of conquest, the Zephyrian Empire suddenly found itself praying to gods they had forgotten, hoping they would never have to face humanity in open combat again. Because some species fight to win. But humans? Humans fight to make sure their enemy never forgets what happens when you threaten their own. Commander Zektar stood on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, his forearms crossed behind his chitinous back as he gazed at the holographic display before him. The blue-green planet rotating slowly in the projection looked so peaceful, so unremarkable. Its third moon caught the light of its yellow star, creating a gentle crescent that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Earth, they called it. The third planet in a system the Galactic Registry had designated as Sol 3. Intelligence reports indicated it harbored a species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. They called themselves humans. "Sir," came the buzzing voice of Sub-Commander Vexay from behind him. "The scouting reports are complete. The human fleet consists of approximately 200 vessels. Most appear to be converted civilian craft. Their military ships are primitive, using chemical propulsion and simple kinetic weapons." Zektar's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his species. 200 ships. The Zephyrian war fleet currently surrounding the Sol system consisted of over 1,500 vessels, each one a technological marvel that could have decimated entire worlds single-handedly. His own flagship was larger than most human cities. "And their ground forces?" he asked, his voice carrying the authority that had broken a dozen worlds. "Approximately 50 million active military personnel across their planet, sir. They use projectile weapons, chemical explosives, and primitive energy weapons. No plasma technology detected. No quantum disruptors. No molecular dissemblers." Vexay paused. "Sir, with respect, this should be a simple pacification operation. We could complete subjugation within a solar rotation." Zektar turned his large compound eyes toward his subordinate. Vex's Hay was young for a Zephyrian commander, having only overseen the conquest of 3 star systems. He still possessed that eager bloodthirst that marked the inexperienced. Zektar had felt it once, cycles ago, before he learned that conquest was more art than violence. "Tell me, Vexay, what do you know about species that fight beyond their capacity?" The younger commander's antennae twitched in confusion. "Sir, I don't understand. Fighting beyond capacity is suicide. No rational species does such things." "Exactly." Zektar moved to another display showing detailed scans of human military installations. "Every species we have conquered has been rational. The Kalari surrendered when we destroyed their capital city. The Morden laid down arms when we eliminated their fleet. The Crystal Singers of Vega Prime negotiated terms the moment we demonstrated our superior firepower." He gestured at the display showing human cities still brightly lit, still functioning, still defiant despite the massive alien fleet hanging over their world like a sword. "The humans received our surrender demand 18 hours ago, Vexay. Do you know what their response was? No, sir. They didn't respond at all. Instead, they began mobilizing every available civilian to fight. The children are being evacuated not to safety, but to secondary defensive positions. Their elderly are manufacturing ammunition. Their artists and musicians have joined combat units." Zektar's voice carried a note that Vexay had never heard before. "They are not acting rationally." The sub-commander's confidence faltered slightly. "Perhaps they simply don't understand our capabilities, sir. Once we demonstrate our power, we already did." Zektar activated another display showing a burning crater where a human city had once stood. "We destroyed one of their major population centers as a warning. Detroit, they called it, 2 million inhabitants. Do you know what happened afterward?" Vexay remained silent. "Their military recruitment increased by 300%. Their weapons production doubled, and they began broadcasting messages across their planet." Zektar played the audio feed. the strange human language translated into Zephyrian by their computers. People of Earth, today we learned what we face. Today we saw our enemy's power, and today we choose to fight anyway. Not because we think we can win, but because surrender is not in our nature. Humanity has faced extinction before. We faced ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters that should have wiped us out 1,000 times over. But we're still here. We're still fighting, and we'll be fighting long after the stars themselves burn out. The transmission continued, but Zektar cut it off. He had heard enough of these messages over the past day. They all carried the same theme. Defiance without hope. Determination without logic. Sir, Vexay said slowly, surely they must have some hidden weapons, some secret technology we haven't detected. No. Zektar pulled up the technical reports. Their most advanced warship mounts weapons equivalent to what we used 3,000 years ago. Their armor is barely adequate to stop their own projectiles. Their shields, if you can call them that, are simple electromagnetic barriers that wouldn't slow down our weakest plasma bolts. Then why haven't we attacked? Zektar was quiet for a long moment. In truth, he wasn't entirely sure himself. Something about the human transmissions, about the complete lack of fear in the face of overwhelming odds, had given him pause. In his long career, he had learned to trust his instincts. And his instincts were screaming that there was something wrong with this picture. Computer, he said finally. Display all available data on human military history. The holographic display shifted, showing a timeline of human conflicts stretching back thousands of their years, battle after battle, war after war, an endless cycle of violence that dwarfed even Zephyrian military records. Focus on conflicts where humans faced overwhelming odds. The display narrowed. What Zektar saw made his blood run cold. Thermopylae, Alamo, Stalingrad, Rorke's Drift, Warsaw Ghetto, Drain, Mogadishu. Battle after battle where vastly outnumbered human forces had fought against impossible odds. Most had resulted in human defeat, technically speaking. But the aftermath told a different story. Computer cross-referenced these battles with subsequent historical events. The patterns that emerged were disturbing. Every time humans had been cornered, every time they had faced extinction, they didn't just fight. They fought with such ferocity, such complete disregard for their own survival, that even their victories often became legends that inspired generations of enemies to avoid similar confrontations. Sir Vexay said, his voice now uncertain. These historical records show that humans frequently engage in what they call last stands. They appear to prefer death to surrender. Not just prefer it, Zektar corrected grimly. They've turned it into a weapon. The bridge fell silent except for the humming of the ship's systems. Zektar studied the data more carefully. Humans didn't just fight hopeless battles. They fought them in ways that ensured their enemies would remember the cost forever. They turned their defeats into psychological victories that weakened their opponent's will to fight future conflicts. Sir, incoming transmission from the human fleet. Put it through. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a human face. The creature was smaller than a Zephyrian, with pale skin and strange hair covering the top of its head. But its eyes held something that made Zektar instinctively step back. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. The human's voice was steady, almost casual. I'm transmitting from UES Defiance, currently positioned at the edge of your fleet formation. Vexay quickly checked their sensors. Sir, confirmed. A single human vessel has somehow penetrated our outer perimeter undetected. How is that possible? Zektar demanded. The human continued as if she had heard him. You're probably wondering how one of our primitive ships got past your sensors. The answer is simple. We didn't use stealth technology because we don't have any. We just did something your tactical computers couldn't predict. What? Zektar found himself asking aloud. We flew straight at you, broadcasting our approach on all frequencies, with our weapons powered down and our shields off. Your AI dismissed us as a non-threat and filtered us out of your threat assessment. Admiral Chen smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. Human lesson number 1, we don't think like you do. The transmission cut to a wider view, showing the interior of the human ship. Zektar was shocked by what he saw. The vessel was crude, utilitarian, with exposed conduits and jury-rigged systems that would have failed inspection on any civilized world. But it was also packed with humans, hundreds of them, all wearing some form of military gear. You destroyed Detroit, Admiral Chen continued. 2 million people, including my brother's family. I want you to understand something about humans, Commander Zektar. When you hurt one of us, You don't just make enemies of the survivors. You make us stop caring about our own survival. How did she know his name? How did she know he was in command? Computer, scan that vessel for weapons, he ordered quietly. No weapons detected, sir. But there are massive amounts of chemical explosives throughout the ship. Zektar felt his carapace crawl. How much explosive? Enough to destroy a cruiser-class vessel, sir. Possibly more. Admiral Chen was still talking. You want to know what human military doctrine calls a ship loaded with volunteers and enough explosives to cripple a capital ship? We call it a delivery system. And Commander Zektar, we have 200 ships just like this one. And every single one of them is crewed by people who have nothing left to lose. The transmission ended. Zektar stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Around him, his bridge crew had gone completely silent. Finally, Vexai spoke up. Sir, surely they're bluffing. They can't all be suicide ships. Computer detailed scan of the human fleet. Focus on explosive materials. The results appeared on the display, and Zektar felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Fear. Every single human ship was loaded with enough explosives to damage or destroy much larger vessels. Every single one was broadcasting the same message on internal communications. Remember Detroit? Make them pay. They're not trying to win, Zektar whispered. Sir, they're not trying to win the battle, Vexai. They're trying to make us understand that killing humans costs more than leaving them alone. He thought about the historical records, about all those hopeless last stands. Suddenly he understood what he was really looking at. The humans weren't preparing for a battle. They were preparing to teach the galaxy a lesson. And the most terrifying part was that they were willing to die to make sure that lesson was never forgotten. 3 hours after Admiral Chen's transmission, Zektar found himself in an emergency council session with his senior commanders. The holographic conference room aboard the Eternal Conquest buzzed with nervous energy as 12 Zephyrian officers debated their next move. We should proceed with the original assault plan, insisted War Master Kralgoth, his scarred carapace gleaming under the artificial lights. 200 primitive vessels against our fleet? Even if they are all explosive-laden, our shields can withstand. Can they? Interrupted Intelligence Commander Yasset. Computer, calculate probable casualties if all human vessels detonate simultaneously against our fleet formation. The display that materialized silenced the room. Conservative estimates showed the loss of 40 to 60 Zephyrian vessels, with potential casualties reaching into the hundreds of thousands. Acceptable losses, Kurelgov said, but his voice lacked conviction. For what gain? Zektar asked quietly. Think, Krelgoth, what do we gain by taking this system? Standard resources, mineral extraction rights, a new slave population for the labor colonies, all of which become worthless if the slave population refuses to work and continually sabotages operations. Zektar called up the psychological profiles their intelligence division had compiled on humanity. These beings have a concept they call scorched earth. When facing conquest, they destroy everything of value rather than let it fall into enemy hands. Defense Coordinator Kixara leaned forward. Sir, we've dealt with defiant populations before. Standard pacification protocols. Have you read their history? Zektar's question cut through the room like a blade. Computer, display human resistance movements from their last global conflict. The holographic display filled with information about World War II partisan activities. The French resistance, Yugoslav partisans, Soviet guerrillas, Polish underground, Jewish ghetto uprisings. These humans maintained organized resistance against occupying forces for years. In some cases, they fought so effectively that the occupiers required more resources to maintain control than they gained from the territory. Zektar highlighted specific examples. The German forces in Yugoslavia ultimately required 30 divisions just to fight local resistance. 30 divisions that could have been used elsewhere. War Master Krelgoth's mandibles clicked dismissively. Ancient history, Commander. Primitive warfare. Is it? Zektar switched the display to more recent conflicts. Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam. Humans have consistently demonstrated the ability to make occupation more costly than conquest is worth. And these were conflicts between different human groups. Now you want to face an entire species that views us as existential threats. The mood in the room shifted as the implications sank in. Yasset spoke up from her position near the data terminals. Sir, I've been analyzing human communication since we arrived. They're not just mobilizing military forces, they're distributing technical manuals for improvised explosives. They're teaching children how to identify and target command structures. They're organizing civilian populations into resistance cells. Before we've even attacked, added Chichara, understanding dawning in her compound eyes. Exactly. They're not preparing to lose a battle. They're preparing to win a war that could last generations. Zektar manipulated the display to show Earth's population distribution, 4 billion individuals across every continent. If even 1% engages in active resistance, that's 40 million potential guerrilla fighters. If 10% provide support, that's 400 million people working against us. Krelgoth slammed a primary arm against the conference table. Then we eliminate the population entirely, sterilize the planet and be done with it. The room fell silent. Even suggesting planetary sterilization was controversial within Zephyrian military doctrine. It was reserved for the most extreme circumstances, requiring approval from the Imperial Council itself. And accomplish what exactly? Zektar's voice was cold. Computer, how many inhabited systems are within 50 parsecs of Sol? 47 star systems contain intelligent life, sir. And how many of those systems will resist us more fiercely after learning we sterilized an entire planet rather than accept surrender? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Zektar had fought enough campaigns to understand the broader implications. Word of planetary genocide would spread faster than their fleets could travel. Every system they approached afterward would fight with the desperation of species facing extinction. Sir, Vexhai said hesitantly, perhaps we should consider alternative approaches, such as negotiation, trade agreements. Humans have resources and technologies that might be valuable through cooperation rather than conquest. Krelgoth's laugh was harsh. You want to negotiate with primitives? With beings who threaten suicide rather than submit? I want to understand why they're willing to die, Zektar said firmly. Computer display human territorial expansion over the last 5,000 years. The holographic Earth showed human migration patterns spreading across continents, then eventually to other planets within their system. But what caught Zektar's attention wasn't the expansion itself, but how it had occurred. Computer, overlay human population growth with major conflict periods. The pattern was disturbing. Every period of major population growth had been preceded or accompanied by periods of intense conflict. Humans didn't just survive wars, they thrived after them. Their population actually increased faster during recovery periods following devastating conflicts. They're adapted for this, Zektar whispered. Sir, look at the pattern. Humans have spent their entire evolutionary history fighting each other, recovering, growing stronger, then fighting again. War isn't an aberration for them, it's a natural state. Intelligence Commander Yarsed brought up additional data. Sir, analysis of human neurology shows elevated production of combat stimulants during stress. Their brains actually function more efficiently under life-threatening conditions. They have what their scientists call an adrenaline response that enhances physical and cognitive performance. Meaning? Meaning they literally become more dangerous the more threatened they feel. Zektar absorbed this information while studying the faces of his commanders. He could see doubt creeping into their confidence. Good. Doubt kept soldiers alive. There's something else, Yarsed continued. Human bonding patterns are unlike any we've encountered. They form what they call families that extend beyond immediate genetic relationships. They will sacrifice their lives for individuals with no biological connection to them. Irrational, Krelgoth muttered. Is it? Computer compares Zephyrian military unit cohesion with human military unit cohesion under extreme stress. The results were humbling. Human military units maintained operational effectiveness far longer under adverse conditions than comparable Zephyrian forces. They fought harder for their comrades, took greater risks to rescue wounded allies, and showed remarkable resistance to psychological warfare. They don't break, Chisara observed. Even when logically they should surrender, human units continue fighting. Because they're not fighting logically, Zektar said, they're fighting emotionally, for each other, for concepts like honor and freedom and dignity. Concepts that don't exist in nature, Krelgoth protested. But they exist in human nature, and that makes them real enough to die for. Zektar stood and moved to the main display. Computer, show me the human fleet disposition now. The tactical display revealed something that made his compound eyes widen. The human ships were no longer in a defensive formation around Earth. They were spreading out, positioning themselves throughout the solar system. What are they doing? Vexay asked. Computer, project human vessel trajectories. The projection showed the human ships moving to positions that would force the Zephyrian fleet to divide its attention across multiple fronts. Worse, several vessels were heading toward the system's asteroid belt and outer planets. They're not planning to fight us ship to ship, Zektar realized. They're turning their entire star system into a battlefield. Yarset pulled up detailed scans. Sir, the vessels heading to the asteroid belt are equipped with mining charges. They appear to be planning to weaponize the asteroids. How? By destabilizing orbital mechanics. If they detonate charges on key asteroids, they can send debris cascading throughout the system. Any ship trying to navigate would face constant bombardment from unpredictable projectiles. Krelgoth scoffed. They'll destroy their own planets. No, Zektar said slowly, understanding flooding through him. They'll make it impossible for us to occupy the system without massive ongoing casualties. We'd need to maintain constant defensive operations just to keep our ships operational. The truth was becoming clear. The humans weren't preparing for a single battle they expected to lose. They were preparing to make the Sol system uninhabitable for any occupying force. They were willing to sacrifice their own star system to ensure that no one else could have it. Computer, calculate resource requirements for permanent occupation of Sol system under these conditions. The numbers that appeared made several commanders hiss in dismay. Occupying the system would require a significant portion of the entire Zephyrian fleet, indefinitely. They're trying to trap us, Kishara said. Commit our forces to holding their system while the rest of human space organizes resistance. Wait. Vexay was studying another display. Sir, there are other human colonies, 12-star systems with significant human populations. What's their status? The answer chilled the room. Every human colony was implementing similar preparations. Every single human settlement was preparing to turn their local space into a death trap rather than submit to conquest. Zektar felt a strange emotion he hadn't experienced in cycles. Respect. These primitive beings with their crude ships and simple weapons were implementing a strategic doctrine that could, theoretically, bog down the entire Zephyrian war machine in costly occupation duties, while human resistance movements operated freely throughout the galaxy. Sir, Yarset said quietly, we're receiving a new transmission from Admiral Chen. Put it through. The human appeared on screen again, but this time she wasn't alone. The bridge behind her showed representatives from what appeared to be every inhabited human world. Commander Zektar, Admiral Chen said, her voice steady and professional. I believe you've had time to analyze our strategic position. You now understand that conquering humanity will cost more than leaving us alone. But I want to offer you something better than a costly stalemate. Zektar found himself listening intently. Humanity is willing to share our star charts for this galactic region. We know of 17 uninhabited systems with significant mineral wealth. We're also willing to establish limited trade relationships and share certain technologies that might interest your people. And in return? Recognition of human territorial sovereignty and a non-aggression pact. We'll even help you identify other species in this region that might be more amenable to conquest. The offer hung in space between the two fleets. Zektar realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in Zephyrian military history. A species was negotiating from a position of strength despite being completely outgunned, and somehow, impossibly, it was working. Admiral Chen's offer sparked heated debate among Zektar's command staff. For 6 hours, the senior officers argued, while both fleets maintained their positions in an increasingly tense standoff. Zektar listened to the discussions, but his attention kept returning to the tactical displays showing human ship movements. They were still spreading throughout the system, still preparing for a war that would consume everything. Sir, War Master Krelgoth said, during a brief pause in the debate.
With respect, accepting terms from a primitive species sets a dangerous precedent.
What happens when word spreads that the Zephyrian Empire negotiated with beings who should have surrendered immediately? It was a valid concern. The Empire's expansion had relied on the reputation of overwhelming force. If other species learned that humans had successfully negotiated rather than submitted, it could embolden resistance throughout the galaxy. On the other hand, Intelligence Commander Yarset countered, the cost analysis for occupying human space shows resource expenditure that could compromise our operations elsewhere. We have campaigns planned in the Perseus Arm that would be delayed by years if we commit forces here indefinitely. Zektar was still processing this when his tactical officer interrupted. Sir, we're detecting unusual activity from human vessels near Jupiter. The main display shifted to show 3 human ships positioned around the gas giant's largest moons. They appeared to be conducting some kind of mining operation. What are they extracting? Zektar asked. Unknown, sir. They're using focused energy beams to process subsurface materials on Io and Europa. Vexay brought up additional sensor data. Sir, The energy signatures suggest they're extracting helium-3 from the lunar surfaces. But the quantities they're gathering seem excessive for power generation. A chill ran through Zektar's carapace. Computer, what are the potential military applications for large quantities of helium-3? The response confirmed his fears. Helium-3 can be used in fusion reactions for both power generation and weapons applications. Large quantities could theoretically be used to create stellar-class explosives. Stellar-class? Krelgoth's voice cracked slightly. Weapons capable of destabilizing star systems, sir. The conference room fell silent. Zektar studied the display more carefully, noting the positions of human vessels throughout the Sol system. They weren't just preparing to make occupation costly. They were preparing to make it impossible. They're going to destroy their own star, he whispered.
Sir?
If we press the attack, if we refuse their terms, they'll detonate enough fusion material to destabilize their sun. They'll turn their entire system into a stellar bomb that could take out a significant portion of our fleet. Defense Coordinator Kisara pulled up stellar mechanics data. Sir, the calculations. If they could somehow trigger a solar instability, the radiation burst would be lethal across multiple systems. Any ships within 20 parsecs would be at risk. They're insane, Krelgoth breathed. No, Zektar corrected, his respect for human strategic thinking growing. They're thorough. They've analyzed every possible outcome and prepared contingencies that make conquest literally impossible. But sir, Vexhay protested, they'd be destroying themselves as well. Their entire species would be extinct. Would it? Zaktar called up intelligence reports on human colonies. Computer, show me the distribution of human populations across known space. The display revealed something that made the situation even more complex. Humans had established colonies and research stations across dozens of star systems. Earth contained only about 60% of the total human population. They can afford to sacrifice their home system, Zektar realized. The species would survive even if Earth and its colonies were completely destroyed. Yarset was studying her intelligence reports with growing alarm. Sir, there's more. Human colonies have been receiving detailed technical specifications for weapons manufacturing. Advanced weapons. Some of these designs are beyond what we thought their technology could support. Show me. The specifications that appeared on the display made several commanders recoil in shock. Plasma weapons, quantum disruptors, molecular-level manufacturing techniques. Some of the designs were comparable to advanced Zephyrian military technology. Where did they get these plans? Krelgoth demanded. Computer, analyze the origin signatures on these technical documents. The answer was disturbing. Multiple sources detected, including Andromedian, Centaurian, and vegan technological signatures. They have allies, Kisura said flatly. Or trading partners, Zektar corrected. Computer, scan for non-human vessels in surrounding systems. What the sensors revealed changed everything. Dozens of ships from multiple species were positioned just outside the immediate combat zone. Andromedian science vessels, Centaurian merchant fleets, vegan exploration ships. They were all waiting, watching. They're not just fighting for themselves, Zektar said slowly. They're fighting as part of a coalition. A new transmission arrived, and Admiral Chen appeared on screen again. But this time she wasn't alone. Representatives from 6 different alien species stood behind her. Commander Zektar, she said, I'd like you to meet some of our friends. This is Science Leader Morgith of the Andromedian Collective, Trade Master Plex of the Centaurian Commerce Guild, and Explorer Captain Nixara of the Vegan Federation. Each alien nodded in acknowledgement as they were introduced. Zektar recognized the species, but he had never seen them cooperating militarily before. How? He asked before he could stop himself. Admiral Chen smiled. Humans have a saying, Commander. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. It turns out that many species in this region have had unpleasant encounters with Zephyrian expansion forces. When we reached out to them after you arrived, we found we had a lot in common. The Andromedian representative stepped forward. Her crystalline form caught the light as she spoke in perfectly translated Zephyrian. Commander Zektar, the collective has analyzed Zephyrian expansion patterns. Your species follows a predictable cycle of conquest, exploitation, and abandonment. We calculate a 73% probability that you will attack Andromedean space within 50 years. The Centaurian added his voice. The Commerce Guild has economic interests in this region. Zephyrian occupation would disrupt trade routes that have been profitable for centuries.
The vegan was more direct.
We've seen what happens to exploration vessels that encounter Zephyrian fleets. Your shoot-first policy has cost us 17 research expeditions. Admiral Chen stepped forward again. So we formed an alliance. The humans provide military strategy and willing fighters. The Andromedians provide technological support. The Centaurians supply logistics and intelligence networks. The vegans contribute long-range reconnaissance and communication systems. Zektar felt the situation spiraling beyond his control. This wasn't a simple conquest anymore. He was looking at the formation of a multi-species military alliance specifically designed to resist Zephyrian expansion. "Computer," he said quietly, "analyze the military capabilities of a human-led coalition including these species." The results were sobering. Individually, none of these species could challenge the Zephyrian Empire, but combined with human tactical doctrine and willingness to fight, they represented a significant threat to ongoing expansion efforts. "There's more," Admiral Chen continued. "We've established communication with resistance movements on 12 worlds currently under Zephyrian occupation. Turns out teaching guerrilla warfare is one of humanity's oldest skills. We're really good at it." The implications hit Zektar like a physical blow. Humans weren't just threatening to make their own conquest impossible. They were threatening to destabilize the entire imperial expansion effort by spreading resistance techniques to occupied populations. "Sir," Yarsed whispered urgently, "we're receiving reports of coordinated uprisings on Kalari Prime, Morden 7, and Vega Station. The resistance movements are using tactics consistent with human military doctrine." "It's already begun," Zektar realized. Admiral Chen nodded. "Every day you spend here trying to decide whether to attack us, our alliance grows stronger and your existing territories become less stable. The cost of conquest isn't just what it would take to defeat us, Commander. It's what you'll lose everywhere else while you're distracted." Krolgoth was studying tactical displays with growing agitation. "Sir, if these uprisings spread, we could face rebellions across a third of Imperial space. We'd need to withdraw forces from multiple expansion fronts just to maintain control of current territories. And while we're dealing with internal rebellions," Tishara added, "this alliance will continue growing. Other species will join them. Our expansion efforts could be stalled for decades." Zektar looked around at his senior staff and saw something he had never seen before. In Zephyrian command circles, uncertainty. For the first time in anyone's memory, a military operation had no clear path to victory. "Computer, calculate the probable outcomes of all available strategic options." The analysis took several minutes to compile. When it finished, the results showed 3 possible paths: full assault on the Sol system, probable victory with heavy casualties, followed by decades of costly occupation and growing multi-species resistance throughout the galaxy. Negotiated settlement with humanity, loss of imperial prestige, but maintenance of current territorial holdings and continuation of expansion in other directions. Withdrawal without engagement, preservation of military forces and resources, but potential emboldening of other species to resist future expansion efforts. Every option had significant drawbacks, but one factor stood out in all scenarios. Human survival led to continued growth of anti-imperial alliance activities. "They've changed the game entirely," Zektar said finally. "Sir, look at the analysis. In every scenario where humans survive, imperial expansion becomes more difficult. But in scenarios where we destroy them, we face decades of instability and potential collapse of current holdings." He turned to face his command staff. "Gentlemen, I believe we are witnessing the emergence of something that has never existed in this galaxy before. A species that has turned military weakness into strategic strength." War Master Krelgoth slammed his arm against the conference table again. "Then, what do you propose we do, Commander?" "We cannot appear weak. The Empire depends on fear." "Perhaps," Zektar said thoughtfully, "it's time the Empire learned to depend on something else." Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The tactical officer's voice carried across the bridge. "Sir, human vessels are moving. All 200 ships are converging on our position." Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system one more time. "Commander Zektar, you've had 12 hours to consider our offer. We need your decision now. Will you accept the negotiated settlement, or do we proceed with more permanent solutions to this problem?" Zektar looked at the tactical display showing 200 human ships, each loaded with enough explosives to damage or destroy much larger vessels, moving directly toward his fleet. Beyond them, ships from multiple alien species waited to see what would happen next. The moment of truth had arrived. The human ships approached in perfect formation, their crude hulls gleaming dully in the light of Sol's distant star. Zektar watched them advance on his tactical displays, each vessel broadcasting the same simple message. For those we lost. For those we protect. Sir, they're within weapons range, reported his tactical officer. Orders? Zektar remained silent, studying the approaching fleet. 200 ships against 1,500. By every military calculation, it should have been a massacre. But the longer he watched, the more he realized he wasn't looking at a battle formation. He was looking at a funeral procession. Computer analyzed the human ship formations, compared to known tactical doctrines. The results confirmed his growing suspicion. The humans weren't arranged for maximum combat effectiveness. They were arranged to ensure that every ship's destruction would cause maximum psychological impact on watching forces. They're not planning to fight, he said quietly. Sir, Vex Hay moved closer to the tactical display. Look at their formation. They're arranged so that when our weapons hit them, the explosions will be visible to every ship in both fleets. Every death will be witnessed. War Master Krelgoff's mandibles clicked impatiently. So, what does that accomplish? Zektar turned to his senior staff, seeing understanding dawn in their compound eyes. Computer, display human cultural concepts related to martyrdom and sacrifice. The holographic display filled with information about human religious and philosophical traditions surrounding noble death, sacred texts, historical examples, cultural practices that elevated those who died for others above those who simply fought for victory. They're not trying to defeat us militarily, Zektar explained. They're trying to defeat us psychologically. Every human who dies today will become a legend that inspires resistance for generations. Primitive superstition, Krelgoff scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Computer, show me the long-term effects of human martyrdom events on subsequent military recruitment and resistance activities. The data was compelling. Throughout human history, acts of self-sacrifice in the face of overwhelming odds had invariably led to increased resistance activities, often lasting for decades after the original event. Sir, Intelligence Commander Yarset said urgently, we're receiving broadcasts from human colonies throughout the galaxy. They're all watching this confrontation. Put the main colonial feed on screen. The display showed what appeared to be a human civilian, a female with graying hair and lined features, speaking to a camera. My name is Dr. Sarah Martinez, and I'm currently on the Human Research Station at Alpha Centauri. We're watching our brothers and sisters at Earth prepare to make the ultimate sacrifice to protect not just humanity, but the right of all species to exist free from imperial tyranny. The transmission continued, but Zektar had heard enough. He could see the trap now, fully formed and elegantly constructed. If the Zephyrian fleet fired on the approaching human ships, they wouldn't just be destroying military targets, they would be creating martyrs whose deaths would be broadcast across dozens of worlds, inspiring resistance movements for generations to come. Computer, how many inhabited systems are currently receiving human broadcasts of this confrontation? 47 star systems are confirmed to be monitoring, sir. Estimated total viewership exceeds 2 billion individuals across multiple species. 2 billion witnesses to whatever happened next. Sir, the tactical officer announced, human vessels are now within minimum weapons range. If they detonate their explosives at current distance, damage to our fleet would be significant. Zektar nodded, but his attention was focused on something else. Computer, analyze human facial expressions and body language of crew members visible on their ships. The psychological profile that emerged was unlike anything in Zephyrian military experience. The humans weren't showing fear, desperation, or even the battle fury common to most species facing death. They looked peaceful. They've already accepted their deaths, he realized. Sir, look at them. They're not afraid, they're not angry. They've made peace with dying today. Zektar felt a chill run through his carapace. Do you understand what that means? Vex High was studying the displays with growing comprehension. They can't be intimidated because they're not afraid of death. More than that, they've turned death itself into a weapon. If we kill them, we lose. If we don't kill them, we appear weak. They've created a scenario where any action we take serves their strategic goals. Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system again. But this time, she wasn't alone. The transmission showed her standing with crew members from multiple human ships, all wearing the same expression of calm determination. Commander Zektar, you now have less than 5 minutes to decide. But, before you do, I want you to understand something about human military history. The transmission cut to historical footage from human wars. Battles where outnumbered forces had held their ground against impossible odds. Zektar saw humans fighting in conditions that would have broken any rational military force. We call it holding the line, Admiral Chen continued. It means that sometimes victory isn't about defeating your enemy. Sometimes victory is about making sure your enemy understands that some things are worth more than survival. The footage shifted to scenes from human colonies, showing families, children, scientists, artists, normal life continuing under the shadow of war. Every human in this system volunteered for this mission, Admiral Chen said. Not because we thought we could win, but because we knew someone had to stand up and say no more. Someone had to draw a line in space and declare that conquest isn't inevitable, that freedom is worth dying for. The transmission ended with a simple message. We are human. We stand here. Zektar looked around at his command staff and saw something that shook him to his core. Several of his officers were actually reconsidering their positions. Seasoned military commanders who had overseen the conquest of multiple worlds were being swayed by primitive beings with crude weapons and simple words. "Computer," he said quietly, "analyze the strategic implications of this confrontation spreading to other systems. Assume human tactical and psychological doctrines are adopted by other species." The projection that materialized showed the potential collapse of imperial expansion efforts across multiple galactic regions. If other species learned that determined resistance could force the Empire to negotiate, the entire strategy of expansion through intimidation would become impossible. "Sir," War Master Krelgoth said slowly, "if we cannot defeat this tactic here, now, it will spread throughout the galaxy." "Yes. Then we must attack, regardless of casualties." Zektar was silent for a long moment. Military logic demanded that they fire on the approaching human ships. The cost of allowing this tactic to succeed would be measured in the collapse of Imperial power across hundreds of star systems. But something else nagged at him. A detail that had been bothering him since the confrontation began. "Computer, analyze human ship positions relative to our fleet formation. Calculate optimal approach vectors for maximum damage." The results were puzzling. The humans weren't approaching from the optimal angles to maximize damage to Zephyrian vessels. Their formation was designed for something else entirely. "Computer, calculate human ship positions at the moment of probable detonation, assuming they maintain current trajectory." The answer made Zektar's blood run cold. The human ships were positioned so that their explosions would form a specific pattern in space, a pattern that would be visible from every inhabited world in the system and from every ship in both fleets. "They're creating a monument," he whispered. "Sir, the explosion pattern. They've calculated their positions so that when they detonate, the blast effects will form a recognizable symbol visible across the entire system." "What symbol?" Zektar called up human symbolic representations in their database. The match was immediate and unmistakable. A human word written in fire across space. Freedom. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans weren't just planning to die. They were planning to write a message across the cosmos that would be visible to every witness, human and alien alike. "Sir," Yaset said quietly, "at current rate of approach, detonation will occur in 90 seconds. Zektar looked at the tactical display one more time, seeing the careful positioning of human ships, the precise timing of their approach, the coordination required to pull off such a complex symbolic gesture while facing certain death. "Computer, final analysis. If we allow these humans to detonate, what is the probable long-term effect on Imperial expansion efforts?" The answer was unequivocal. Severe degradation of Imperial intimidation effectiveness across all sectors. Estimated reduction in successful conquest operations, 70 to 90%.
And if we fire on them before they reach detonation position?
Immediate tactical victory with heavy casualties. Probable psychological victory for human propaganda efforts. Estimated increase in resistance activities across Imperial territories, 200 to 400%. Zektar realized he was looking at something that had never existed in galactic military history. A perfect strategic trap. Every possible action led to defeat for the Empire. 60 seconds to detonation, the tactical officer announced. Zektar looked at his senior staff one more time. "Recommendations?" War Master Krelagoth spoke first. "Fire everything. Destroy them before they can complete their demonstration." Defense Coordinator Kisara disagreed. "Withdraw. Preserve our forces for battles we can actually win." Intelligence Commander Yaset had a different perspective. "Neither option achieves our strategic goals, sir. Perhaps it's time to consider what the humans are actually offering." "Which is?" "Coexistence. They're not threatening Imperial territory. They're simply demanding the right to exist independently. Zektar thought about this as he watched the human ships continue their steady approach. 2 minutes to write freedom in nuclear fire across the Sol system. 2 minutes to change galactic military doctrine forever. Computer, open a channel to Admiral Chen. Channel open, sir. Admiral Chen, this is Commander Zektar. Before you proceed with your demonstration, I want you to know something. Her image appeared on the main screen, showing the bridge of her ship as it approached detonation position. What's that, Commander? In my 30 years of military service, I have never encountered opponents who impressed me as much as you and your people have today. Admiral Chen smiled. Thank you, Commander. But we're not trying to impress you. We're trying to survive. I know, Zektar said quietly. And I believe you've succeeded. He turned to his tactical officer. All ships, stand down weapons. Signal fleet-wide withdrawal to a distance of 50,000 kilometers. Sir? Krelgoth's voice was sharp with disbelief. We're accepting Admiral Chen's terms, Zektar announced. The Zephyrian Empire recognizes human territorial sovereignty and agrees to a non-aggression pact. On the screen, Admiral Chen looked genuinely surprised. Commander, are you certain about this decision? Admiral, 30 minutes ago I would have said that no primitive species could threaten the Empire. You've taught me that there are different kinds of strength in the universe. He paused, watching as the human ships began to alter course, moving away from detonation positions as his message was relayed to their fleet. Today, humanity has won something more valuable than a military victory. You've won the respect of an empire. 3 years had passed since the confrontation at Sol, and Commander Zektar stood once again on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest. But this time, he wasn't preparing for battle. He was attending the signing of the Sol Accords, the most comprehensive peace treaty in galactic history. The ceremony was taking place aboard a neutral space station in the buffer zone between human and Zephyrian space. Representatives from 47 different species had gathered to witness what many historians were already calling the end of the Age of Conquest. Sir, Vex High approached him, now bearing the insignia of a full commander himself. The human delegation has arrived. Through the viewport, Zektar could see the approaching human vessel. It was larger than the crewed ships that had faced his fleet 3 years ago, but it still bore the utilitarian design philosophy that marked human engineering. Function over form, efficiency over elegance. Any word from Imperial Command? Zektar asked. The Emperor has confirmed your authority to negotiate final terms, Vex High replied. Though he's not entirely pleased with the precedent this sets. Zektar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. The Emperor's displeasure was understandable. In the 3 years since Sol, the Zephyrian Empire's expansion had effectively ground to a halt. Not because their military couldn't conquer new worlds, but because the cost of holding them had become prohibitive. Computer, display current status of Imperial territories. The holographic map that materialized showed the uncomfortable truth. Of the 43 worlds currently under Imperial control, 17 were dealing with active resistance movements. All of them were using tactics derived from human military doctrine. The humans had kept their word about sharing those tactics with anyone who wanted to learn them. Sir, Intelligence Commander Yarset joined them at the viewport. She carried a data pad with the latest reports from across the galaxy. The numbers are getting worse. Occupation costs have increased by 400% over pre-Sol levels. We're spending more resources maintaining control than we're extracting from conquered territories. And recruitment for the resistance movements? Growing exponentially. The Human Freedom Network now spans 86 star systems. They're not just teaching military tactics, sir. They're spreading ideas. Ideas. Zektar had learned to respect that word over the past 3 years. The humans hadn't just threatened the Empire with weapons or military force. They had introduced concepts that spread like viruses through the galactic community. Self-determination, individual rights. The idea that conquest wasn't the natural order of the universe. Computer, show me the current composition of the Sol Alliance. The display shifted to show what had once been a desperate alliance of convenience. The Sol Alliance now included 32 species across 147 star systems. They weren't united by conquest or intimidation, but by voluntary association and mutual defense agreements. It was a completely new model for galactic civilization. Sir, we're being hailed by Admiral Chen, the communication officer announced. Put her through. Admiral Sarah Chen appeared on the main screen, and Zektar was struck by how much she had changed. The desperate determination that had marked her 3 years ago had been replaced by quiet confidence. She looked like someone who had won more than just a battle.
Commander Zektar, she said with a slight smile, Thank you for coming to the signing ceremony. I know this can't be easy for you.
Admiral, in my culture, we believe that true honor comes from recognizing when you've been outmatched by a superior opponent.
We didn't outmatch you militarily, Commander. We just convinced you that there were better ways to achieve your goals. Zektar considered this. In the 3 years since Sol, the Empire had indeed found other ways to achieve many of its objectives. Trade agreements had replaced conquest in several sectors. Technology exchanges had proven more profitable than resource extraction through force. The Empire was still powerful, still wealthy, still influential. It just wasn't expanding through conquest anymore. Admiral, before we proceed with the formal ceremony, I have a personal question. Of course. Did you really intend to detonate those ships? Would you have gone through with it? Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment. Commander, every person on those ships had volunteered knowing they probably wouldn't survive the day. We weren't bluffing. We were prepared to die to prove that some things can't be conquered. But you hoped it wouldn't be necessary. We hoped you would be intelligent enough to see the larger picture. And you were. The transmission ended, and Zektar found himself reflecting on the events of the past 3 years. The Battle of Sol, as historians were calling it, had lasted less than 6 hours and involved no actual combat. But its effects had transformed galactic civilization. Sir, Vexai said quietly, the formal ceremony is beginning. They made their way to the main conference chamber, where representatives from dozens of species were gathering around a large circular table. The design was intentionally non-hierarchical, with no head position that would suggest dominance. Another human innovation. Admiral Chen stood as they entered, and Zektar noticed that she was accompanied by the same diverse group that had supported humanity during the confrontation. Andromedians, Centaurians, vegans, and several species he had never seen before. Commander Zektar, Admiral Chen said formally, on behalf of the Sol Alliance, I welcome you to these proceedings. The ceremony itself was unlike any military or diplomatic event in Zektar's experience. Instead of formal declarations of surrender or submission, the Accords established principles of mutual respect, non-interference, and voluntary cooperation. The Empire would maintain control of systems that wished to remain under Imperial rule, while recognizing the independence of systems that chose to join the Sol Alliance or remain neutral. More importantly, the Accords established protocols for resolving conflicts without warfare. Computer, Admiral Chen said during a break in the proceedings, display the current galactic map showing territorial affiliations. The hologram that appeared showed a galaxy divided not by conquest, but by choice. Imperial worlds clustered in traditional Zephyrian space. Alliance worlds formed a growing network across the outer rim. Neutral systems created buffer zones between different spheres of influence. It was messy, complex, and completely unprecedented. It was also remarkably stable. Commander, Admiral Chen approached him during the final break in negotiations. I want you to know that humanity bears no ill will toward the Zephyrian people. Your empire has achieved remarkable things. We just believe there's room in the galaxy for different approaches to civilization. Zektar studied the human diplomat. Admiral, may I ask you something that's been troubling me? Certainly. Your species' willingness to sacrifice everything for abstract principles. Where does it come from? Admiral Chen considered the question carefully. I think it comes from our history, Commander. Humans spent thousands of years learning that some things are worse than death. Slavery, oppression, the loss of hope. We learned that preserving those things for future generations was worth any sacrifice. Even extinction? Especially extinction. Because extinction with dignity is still better than survival without freedom.
Zektar absorbed this. And you believe other species share these values?
We believe every species has the right to decide that for themselves.
The final ceremony concluded with the signing of documents that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. As Zektar added his biosignature to the treaty, he reflected on how much had changed. 3 years ago, he had commanded the most powerful fleet in the galaxy and believed that force was the ultimate arbiter of civilization. Today, he was signing an agreement that limited imperial expansion while opening new possibilities for cooperation and growth. Commander, Admiral Chen said as the ceremony concluded, there's one more thing I'd like to discuss with you. Yes? The Sol Alliance is planning several joint exploration missions to uncharted regions of the galaxy. We believe there are resources and opportunities out there that could benefit all our peoples. Would the Empire be interested in participating? Zektar looked around the chamber at the representatives of dozens of species working together, sharing knowledge, building something larger than any single civilization could achieve alone. "Admiral," he said finally, "I believe the Empire would be very interested indeed." 6 months later, Zektar stood on the bridge of a joint exploration vessel, watching as human, Zephyrian, Andromedian, and Centaurian scientists worked together to analyze readings from a newly discovered star system. The cooperation wasn't always smooth, but it was proving remarkably effective. "Sir," his science officer reported, "we've confirmed the presence of rare crystalline formations on the fourth planet. The humans recommend establishing a joint research station."
Approved, Zektar said without hesitation. As he watched the mixed species crew working together, he thought about the report he would send back to Imperial Command.
The exploration mission had discovered more valuable resources in 6 months than the Empire had conquered in the previous 2 years of military campaigns, and the cost had been a fraction of what military conquest would have required. "Computer," he said quietly. Personal log entry. "Recording, sir. Today marks 6 months since the beginning of the joint exploration program. Resource acquisition rates exceed all projections. Cooperation between species has led to technological innovations that none of our civilizations could have achieved independently." He paused, watching a human technician explain a new scanning technique to a Zephyrian engineer. The humans were right about something else. There are different kinds of strength in the universe. The strength to conquer, yes. But also the strength to build, the strength to cooperate, the strength to choose coexistence over domination. Another pause, as he considered his final thoughts. "I believe we are witnessing the beginning of a new age in galactic civilization. Not an age of conquest or empire, but an age of alliance and cooperation. And despite my initial skepticism, I find myself looking forward to seeing what we can accomplish together." He closed the log entry and turned his attention back to the mixed crew working around him. They were exploring, discovering, building something new. They were proving that humanity's greatest victory hadn't been avoiding conquest. It had been teaching the galaxy that there were better ways to reach for the stars. Outside the viewports, the unexplored galaxy stretched endlessly in all directions, waiting for civilizations that had learned to work together instead of fighting each other. It was, Zektar realized, a much more interesting universe than the one he had known before he witnessed humans in battle and learned what they were truly fighting for. They hadn't been fighting for victory. They had been fighting for the right to choose their own destiny. And in the end, that had made all the difference.